Hello and welcome to our second video on States of Matter 2-7 class notes. In our first video, we took a look at the 4 states of matter that we would investigate or need to understand in a Chemistry 1 class. We also learned that there are many other states of matter that you wouldn't really need to know for a Chem 1 class, but if you're interested, there will be an opportunity to watch some videos on those states of matter if that's something that you're like, wow, that would be cool to know that stuff. We've been talking about the fact that we can go from a solid, liquid, gas, plasma. And when we go in this direction, we would have to add energy into the state in order to get it to change. So if we have a solid and we want it to melt into a liquid, we would have to add energy in. If we have a liquid and we want it to undergo evaporation or we want it to vaporize into a gas, we would have to add energy in. And if we have a gas and we want to turn it into a plasma, where we would have to get the electrons to fly off the atoms, again, we would have to add energy in. When we add energy in to get that process to occur, it would be called an endothermic process. Endothermic, and we're looking at the movement of heat. When you have to add heat into it in order to get it to occur, it's called endothermic. Endo, think of in, or endoskeleton is on the inside. You would need to move heat from the environment into the system. So to get a solid to change to a liquid, you would add a heat into it. To get a liquid to go to a gas, you would add heat energy into it. Endo, adding energy into the system. If you have a liquid and you want it to vaporize into a gas, you would have to add energy into it. In other words, if you have water and you want it to boil, you would heat it up. You would add energy into it. Endothermic, energy in. The amount of energy you would need to add in to get a solid to change to a liquid state, the amount of energy you would add into it, the total energy needed to add into it, the heat you would have to add into it, is called the heat of fusion. Now we have a liquid, and if we want to get that liquid to undergo vaporization, turning into a gas, we would have to add energy into it. The amount of energy needed that you would have to add, the total energy needed to get it to go from a liquid to a gas, is called heat of vaporization. If endo means adding heat into something, exo would be the opposite. You would have to pull heat out of it. You would have to get the system to release energy out to the environment. Energy moving from the inside to the out is called exothermic. Exothermic is when a process gives off energy or releases energy from the system to the outside. When you think of exo, think of the word exit. Exothermic would mean energy has to exit the substance and travel into the surroundings. Exo, where's your exoskeleton? If you have an exoskeleton, it is on the outside. Exo, heat flows out. Exo, heat moves out to the environment or the surroundings. So if I have a gas, for instance, and I want to get that gas to condense to a liquid, I would have to pull heat energy out of that gas to slow the gas molecules down, slow them way, way down so that then the molecules can begin pulling on each other, and that would be the process called condensation, where the gas molecules pull back together and form a liquid. If you remember, the liquid molecules are free to move around each other. If I want to slow those molecules down so that they begin to line up into a solid, I would have to pull heat out of it. I would have to remove heat energy from that to get them to slow down enough where they can line up into a solid. Pulling heat out, that's exothermic process. So to freeze something from a liquid to a solid, I would have to remove energy exothermic. In our picture right here, I have a gas. In order to get that gas to condense into a liquid, I would have to remove energy. To get that liquid to freeze into a solid, I would have to remove energy. So the process of condensation is exothermic. Condensation is exothermic. To get the liquid to go to a solid, I would have to remove it. If you want something to freeze, you have to remove energy from it. Freezing is exothermic. Heat would have to go from the liquid out to the environment to get it to go from a liquid to a solid. Likewise, to get a solid to go to a liquid, you add energy. In other words, to melt something, you add energy. The processing of melting is endothermic. You add energy into it. To get a liquid, to have those particles of a liquid or molecules of a liquid begin to fly out of the liquid and become a gas, you would have to add energy into it. You would have to add energy into it to get it to go from a liquid to a gas. The process of vaporization, that's the process of a liquid going to a gas, is endothermic. You have to add heat into it. When a substance is changing from a liquid to a gas on its own, it's called evaporation. So what are the terms? We've just went over some of the terms of these phase changes. Melting is a solid changing into a liquid. The temperature at which a solid changes to a liquid is called the melting point. As we mentioned, the amount of energy that you need to add to a solid to get it to change to a liquid is called the heat of fusion. The heat of fusion is a physical property of the substance. Different substances have different amounts of heat you have to add to get them to change from a solid to a liquid. But again, that energy is called a heat of fusion. Now, the opposite of that, a liquid going to the solid state, is called freezing. And to freeze something, you would remove heat, exothermic. The temperature at which a solid changes into a liquid is called the freezing point. Evaporation, that's happening on its own. Vaporization is when you are making it happen. In order to get a liquid to vaporize, you would add energy into it, endothermic. The process of a liquid changing to a gas, vaporization. The temperature at which that occurs is called the boiling point. The boiling point is a temperature at which a liquid changes to a gas. It's called the boiling point. Boiling point is a temperature. Melting point is a temperature. Freezing point is a temperature. The amount of energy you have to add to get that liquid to change into a gas, that's called heat of vaporization. The energy needed that you would have to add. Heat of vaporization, again, is a physical property. Different substances have different amounts of energy that you have to add into them, endo, in order to get that phase change to occur. Now, what do we call it when a gas changes into a liquid? That's called condensation. The process of a gas changing into a liquid. The temperature at which that occurs is called the condensation point. Condensation point, the temperature at which a gas changes to a liquid. Now, we already know that there are some substances where it skips the liquid phase or liquid state. Certain solids will go directly to a gas. That's called sublimation. An example of a substance which undergoes sublimation is dry ice, frozen CO2. Frozen CO2 are gas particles of CO2 that have been put under great pressure and low temperature, and you have dry ice. They're sticking together. But as soon as enough energy is present, the molecules of the dry ice will never melt. They will fly right out of the solid state straight into gas state. That's called sublimation. The process of getting CO2 gas molecules into that frozen state of dry ice, that's deposition. Where a gas changes directly to a solid, it skips the liquid state. What about a gas going into plasma? What do we call it when a gas goes to plasma state at a very high energy where the electrons fly off? That's called ionization. When the electrons return to the atoms to form, return to the ions, because when the electrons fly off, you have an ion. That's why it's called ionization energy. So a gas going to plasma is called ionization energy because you form ions, and those ions are the positive nuclei left behind. But when the electrons return to those positive nuclei, it's called deionization, the electrons returning. And that would occur as the temperature is lowered, allowing the electrons back. Here is a little chart summarizing all those different changes. Again, a gas going directly to a solid is called deposition. A solid going directly to a gas is called sublimation. A gas going to plasma is called ionization. A plasma going back to a gas is called deionization energy. A gas going to the liquid state is called condensation. A liquid going to gas state is called vaporization. A liquid returning to the solid state is called freezing. A solid going to the liquid state is called melting. The energy to get a liquid to go to the gas is called heat of vaporization. The energy to get a solid into the liquid state is called heat of fusion. This wraps up our notes 2-7 on states of matter, the vocabulary associated with states of matter, and the changes those states of matter undergo. Thank you for watching.